It's Tom Mason back with the mini sculpting super show. This is episode 3. Today, this time, it will be for part 2 of our 15mm miniature series. This one has been very tough for me, I have to admit. So I decided to, I keep looking kind of over here because this is what I was working on. So that's what you'll see in a minute. But anyways, it was tough for me, I have to admit. Because one, I haven't done 15mm in a long time, and I'm used to sculpting, small things obviously, but this is extra small, and I also, in preparation for the next video I'm going to work on, which will be to kind of talk about and explain putties, I decided I was going to sculpt this figure out of putty, Greenstuff, and it was a lot more challenging than I thought. I mean, I use it in my day-to-day sculpting, usually just for hands or little bits, and I'm not trying to create a whole form and whatnot. So, but got it done as far as I took it for this part, because I knew I just had to get it out there. I had to keep pushing forward so we can get this part done, and then we'll do the final part 3 in a couple more weeks, and yeah, keep things rolling on this channel for teaching how to sculpt miniatures. So, oh yeah, I think that's it for now. So,
alright, and after that awkward transition, let's get into this tutorial. So, like I said, this is part 2 of sculpting 15mm miniatures. I'm going to put a link up here in the video overlay so you can go back and check out part 1 if you haven't seen that yet. There I showed you how to create this armature, and now I am, after the armature has been made and placed into the rubber stopper base here, now I'm posing the character up. This is going to be a little goblin figure. Excuse me. So he's a little shorter than 10mm, or he's around 11mm, I think is what he ended up at. So it's a little shorter than 15, but still within that range and scale there. So started by bending his legs. I want to say this too. I left him in the base here when I posed him, because in the last video I was mainly showing you how to build the armature and set it up, and I pressed it in, and I decided that I was going to just pose him and leave him in the base. It's a little easier to show on the video, but I would recommend that you I'd recommend that you build it outside of the base, so or pose it rather. So rather than, keeping the feet stuck into the stopper like I did and bending it around, it can be a little easier to manipulate the armature without that, typically. And plus, in this case, I actually wish that I ended up making the feet a little bit wider, but I think it'll still be pretty cool looking. And obviously, you can't make them wider if the character's already in the stopper. Now I moved on to the arms. I was basically I kind of had a feel for a sense of the proportions. I wasn't too worried about the exact size of the arms or anything like that. One of the tips I can give anybody that's just getting into sculpting, regardless of the size, is it can be very helpful to not do a human, which has proportions that we are all very familiar with, very comfortable with. It can be very helpful to do a creature that is still humanoid because you're learning how the body moves and form, but you're not restricted in the same way of having to stick to very well-known proportions that can look extremely off and unbalanced if you miss it even slightly. Now I'm going on to skinning the miniature. This is again very similar to what I've shown in other videos for the 28 and larger figures. I like to get a little base of putty on there. Now with this, I won't be adding Fimo. You can do that, but I wanted this character to be stay pretty slim and trim. And frankly, when you're working at this size, most of them are. So you can do the same technique of adding Fimo on top of Greenstuff, but it is a little more difficult because you end up, it's very easy to overbulk your figure. And when you just use putty, you just, whatever you add is what's on, and you can shave things off, and you're never going to hit different material like you would if Fimo. If you ended up trimming off too much, you would have Greenstuff that you can't manipulate. So it's nice to try and keep it all uniform, in my opinion. But uh, as I mentioned earlier, if you're not familiar with Greenstuff and or rusty, as I mentioned I was a bit, then that has its own difficulties. Another cool thing about working in 15 millimeter is that because it's so small, normally you want to get a skin of putty over the armature. That just gives you a better base for further putty or clay to stick to, and it also strengthens the armature so it doesn't bend quite as easily. So it's nice to do a whole base, but because 15 millimeter miniatures are so tiny, you can get away with not waiting for it to cure. You can get this base on, or put more than this base on in an area and go to town. In this case, I did just skin the whole thing, but as you'll see in a little bit, I start adding some feet. I could have very easily laid on the skinning for the legs, maybe even a little more, and built it up all that. And if you're going to do a lot of these, and once you get more comfortable with it, I actually would suggest sculpting that way. You don't need to wait for it all to set up. I mean, you can, but there's really no reason. It'll save you a lot of time, and you can really start banging these things out much faster. Alright, just adding a little bit more on the head to fill the form. This character is going to have a much larger head in proportion to his body. I'm just going to have a lot of fun with it, so... Now you can see here I'm starting to bend the wire up, and what I'm doing here, and I think I mentioned in the last video, you want to leave extra length of wire on the arms. I think I've said that with the larger figures, but it's even more important here when working with 15, because while you can have separate weapons, separate bits, and stick them on to the 15 millimeter, it's a lot easier to just have an armature, if you will, for the piece of equipment they're holding, whether it's a sword or a gun. And you just put a little bit of putty on here to build a base, and then you add onto it and just sculpt onto it that way. Then you don't have to worry about it accidentally popping off or breaking off, or not having enough room in this small form to make the hand look like the correct size, without making it look too bulky. Things like that. So this little guy is gonna kind of moving forward. He's gonna have a scimitar or a nasty looking knife or something like that. Right here I'm using Vaseline or petroleum jelly. I think it's generic, so it's technically petroleum jelly. This is my favorite material to use when I'm doing a lot of work with... Oh, there's my daughter. She wanted to say hi. This is my favorite substance to use for lubrication when working with Greenstuff. A lot of it, if it's just a little bit, like if I'm sculpting just a hand on one of my mainline figures that I work on day to day, I usually can just get away with, little face grease or saliva. But the petroleum jelly is really nice. It really helps your tools not stick to the putty. And the way I set it up, you need to be very careful. You don't want to put too much on it, especially if you're going to be adding a lot of putty at once. I just put a little bit on the top knuckle of my thumb, and you just dab your tool in it, but then you wipe it off on, like, farther down your thumb or wherever, and so that there's just a little bit of the lubrication on the tool. And that way you have the lubrication you need, but you're not transferring a large blob of that petroleum jelly onto the the putty or the Armature itself. So you just need just enough to manipulate to keep the tool from sticking to the putty. And I'll talk a lot more about that in my next video when I think it's the next one, but when I talk about working with putties, because that's very important. A lot of people are afraid of their tools sticking to the putty, and it is a concern, but there's actually a lot you can do with putty by letting it stick to your tools, and if you have it, if it's too slick, then you just can't do that. So and as you can see here, I put a decent amount of Greenstuff on for the feet, but as I got it into place, I realized it was too large, and that's just something that takes a little bit of getting used to with these 15 millimeters. Sometimes it can be nice to let things be larger, but it's very easy to have. I mean, a little putty goes a long way, and it's very easy to get too much on there. Bulking out the torso a little bit, just so I have a little more of a base to work with when I move on to finishing this sculpt. What I should say during these dead periods? I should write a list or something. Maybe you guys can leave comments down in the suggestions, or leave suggestions down in the comments. Things that you'd like to hear about, or that I could talk about when there's not as much to say about a figure. Because I like being able to talk through these with you guys, tell you what I'm doing, so you're not just having to decode it visually, but sometimes there's something to say. But I would like to still be able to tell you guys about things that are going on, or maybe answer other questions that you have that might not even be related to the video. So, alright, doing the final little details on the feet. I let that set up just a little bit, and cut in. I decided he's going to have he's going to be a three, I don't know what it's called, not limbs, appendages, but three-toed, three-fingered goblin creature. Just again, have a little fun, and again, for the purpose of the video, it'll be a little easier for you guys to see what I'm doing too, because again, it's a little bit larger elements rather than 5 tiny toes. You have 3 slightly larger ones. Alright, so we're getting towards the end of this video, the sculpting part, and gonna have an outro here for you in a second. So thanks for watching.
Alright, thanks for watching this latest video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you didn't notice, I meant to say this earlier, but I've got a new setup going on. I moved my studio around, and now I am fully surrounded and immersed in my workspace at home. So it's been very nice, and I have to decorate it and do some painting still, but it's nice to have a space just for me to work in. So I'm hoping that it's allowing me to keep things set up a little more permanently and be more comfortable working. So yeah, thanks for watching, and give the video a like, share it if you know somebody that's interested in this stuff, and as always, leave a comment below so I can answer your questions and we can create a discussion and keep building this community. So thanks for watching, and keep sculpting.